What makes a legend? What decides who is the GOAT? Well, when I hear the word GOAT, there's only one name that comes to mind. This is the name of a man who made his weakness into his strength. I already talked about Ayrton Senna's driving, but I felt like I needed to make a separate video just for him. Cause I think he might just be the greatest driver to grace this planet. While talking about grace, his driving is the best example of grace mixed with aggression. Ayrton had a good background, his family was well to do, and he started go-karting from about 4 years old. He was already honing his skills from that time, but there's a determination in him that surpasses pretty much all other drivers I know. You can say what you want about having a privileged background, but nothing came to him easy. Throughout his life, you can say he fought for what he wanted. And a lot of the time, who he was fighting was himself on the racetrack. Let's delve into his technique. Ayrton would brake late, but softer than all other drivers. Then he would lift off the brake relatively early and very aggressively as he turns in hard. Trail braking for a very brief moment. For the initial turn in time, there was a trail brake, but the turn in with the trail brake was just much faster, much shorter time, getting the benefit of the brakes without them being engaged for the rest of turn in. The benefit of the short time aggressive turn in, aggressive trail brake, the rest is gracing with no brakes, no inputs, but the center of balance is shifted forward. The weight is on the front end, so his tires can use their deformation to full potential just for cornering. After turn in, he had the benefit of the brakes without them being engaged. Sometimes you would completely ignore the idea of a trail brake, lift off and then turn in 5 minutes later. This might sound contradictory, totally wrong driving. How is he so fast if he totally ignores the idea of a trail brake? But he justifies this in mid-corner. His entry speed is intentionally way too fast, but then mid-corner he would dab the brake and stab the throttle interchangeably. The brake would shift the center of balance forward aggressively, giving the front tires more grip, but he would lift off the brake for a super small time margin where he would stab on the gas. The stab of the throttle to lift up the wheel speed ratio, rotating his McLaren. Let's look at it more closely to understand everything. At the first corner of Suzuka, well, look at this, he's braking so much later. It's like he's doing a proper trail brake, turning in but then lifting off completely, letting it glide a little. He is nearly connecting his trail brake to his throttle brake control, on and off the brake, due to the type of corner he is on. The corner at Suzuka is a bend that gets more aggressive the further you go. My favorite type of corner, as he takes a little bit of a wider entry, not sticking to the inside, in order to get a good exit, so wanting to rotate more in the earliest stage of this corner while still having a rounded enough racing line. He dabs the brake and stabs the throttle wide open, average under 40% opening throttle. He is keeping the RPMs at the desired level, lifting up the wheel speed ratio. Ayrton's forced rotation by wheel speed ratio makes the front turn in faster and deforms the rear tires to quite an extreme level. If you didn't already notice, Ayrton always maintains a gentle minimal steering angle from once he turns in and through rotation. He doesn't input more steering angle than the front should be steering unless he uses understeer rotation. Driving from behind Ayrton, you see a strange phenomenon, but I'll explain the technique a little bit if you don't already understand. Very refined, he turns in the front end and the rears follow fast. Then mid-corner, as he is using his throttle brake technique to lift up the wheel speed ratio, but the open throttle does more than just rotate the car along with the brake. The open throttle, over the balanced center of rotation, laterally deforms the rear tires to quite a high level, and all this takes a load of inertia off the front end due to the center of rotation being balanced. Now the front end is rotating around the engine instead of pulling it, and we see a spurt of yaw rotation. He is leaning on the front and the rear tires. Ayrton uses the brake to control the center of balance, but it's not always dive forward because he wants to also lean on his rear tires as much as the fronts, and we see a spurt of refined yaw rotation. The front is turning more, not due to the more steering angle, but due to the balanced center of rotation. The rear is making the front rotate sharper, as he already turned in till the threshold told that the front tires need to rotate. He doesn't scrub speed with the front tires. And as the car subtly yaw rotating, the rear is not going wide in a drift. He's not using any rear drift angle, but rather the rear is rapidly following the front end, and it's easily keeping up. It's truly next level driving. So Senna will use the braking throttle to rotate, deform, but also manage the center of balance. They all work together, they were all connected, and so they all had to be perfect. The sensation you see from Ayrton's driving when you're looking from behind, man, such a stable yaw rotation at high speed, but it looks like he has inside rear wheel steering. We see a similar sensation in Keiichi Tsuchiya's driving. Difference is, Keiichi likes to use understeer to rotate, and he's very aggressive, yet super precise with the throttle to deform and lean on those rear tires to full potential. Look how the front is jumping, creating enough rotation for the corner. Then he calms it down on the brakes as he is nearly on the trajectory toward the apex. He doesn't need as much rotation, so he tries to scrub off as little speed as possible. As he brakes less, keeps the revs up until he exits the corner like a druid of wrath. Look at these bends. Look how he's controlling the speed. Look how he's controlling his rotation. Suzuka is one of his favorites and is truly one of mine too. Although sometimes he does induce tire slip. If need be, he'd induce it by instinct, creating enough rotation for the corner. Then he calms it down on the brakes as he is nearly on the trajectory toward the apex. He doesn't need as much rotation, so he tries to scrub off as little speed as possible. As he brakes less, keeps the revs up until he exits the corner like a druid of wrath. Look at these bends. Look how he's controlling the speed. Look how he's controlling his rotation. Suzuka is one of his favorites and is truly one of mine too. The way Ayrton controlled the throttle in stabs and not in one modulated hold on the throttle made it easier to maintain the desired tire chemistry. And he anticipates everything better, since the road is changing, if he hits a damp spot, while he's constantly in this game of modulating by stabbing and controlling the center of balance, while the tires are being handled at their perfect chemistry. Keiichi Tsuchiya also does the same thing. If you want to control the throttle perfectly modulating from entry to exit, you'd need 100% surety of tire chemistry perfection, and your initiation would need to be aggressive enough to immediately start in the sweet spot. But it's very hard to control the throttle like that. And also, Senna wants his center of balance forward, so he needs the brakes. So Senna rather chooses to stab the throttle, and guess what? He does it so efficient. It's as good as perfect throttle modulation, all because of one thing. He feels his car and he listens to it. Center of rotation, center of balance, tire chemistry, throttle and brake are perfectly synced in his brain, that he controls his McLaren perfectly by instinct. He acts on what he feels. It's as simple as that. Sometimes he'd skid the rear wheels for extreme rotation. Sometimes he'd be more gentle. Sometimes he'd hardly stab the throttle. Sometimes he'd just be stabbing with no brakes. But with this amazing technique that controls center of balance and rotation came a side effect: instant power. Whether it's a 1,500, 600, 700 horsepower turboed engine or a naturally aspirated V12 with zero lag, his technique made him stay at the perfect RPM to never bog down. His turbos would be perfectly spooled up if there were any. And for the exits, he controlled his engine and his tire chemistry so well that he totally controlled the RPM of the wheels with the engine while still keeping them tires at the perfect sweet spot to deform to full potential and not skid like mad, so he could put all his power down. This often gave the illusion that his car was a four-wheel drive. That's how fast he exits. Yeah, Fujiwara's zone was first done by a Brazilian. Sorry guys, Takumi learned from Senna. You know Bunta Fujiwara? Yeah, he was friends with Ayrton. But the reason I love Senna so much is because his driving fundamentals are just plain perfection. He has such a close and deep connection to his car that he knows how to drive every single corner only from what his car tells him. He uses throttle and brake technique, but he also uses understeer rotation and so many other techniques because he has a connection to his car. He could do anything he wanted. Hit an apex after entering too fast, acing awkward corners like it's more than a breeze. It's more like a a passion. Evidence of that, he's king of Monaco. He controlled the car as if it was one of his limbs. And I'm sure you can see that by all of this, Senna would be the boss of the Tour if he ran on it. I mean, hell, he won 3 times at Imola. He won 6 times in Monaco. Let's make that 7. Oh, and remember, in the 70s and in the early 80s, those Formula 1 cars, the engines were mid-rear mounted. And there was a transaxle in the rear position, just like all the modern day Ferraris. I talk in another video of how this throws off handling, that a transaxle is such a piece of trash. But it was no problem for Senna. Yes, of course, the cars with no transaxles, but rather the gearbox mounted in front of the rear axle and behind the engine were much more balanced and it was much faster. He won the championships with the McLarens. McLaren dominated. Ferrari clinged onto the transaxle for the longest time, and that's partly why they sucked. But Ayrton performed an art on these cars, his Tormen and his Lotus. Ayrton's technique suited it. Controlling the center of balance, the transaxle wouldn't create an unstable seesaw of excessive weight transfer. Rather, he had it locked in. And as he is rotating, the inertial weight torque of the gearbox would actually make the tires laterally deform more. He rotated to the desired level he wanted and nothing less. In the early 70s, when Senna was driving his Lotus and his Tormen, if we're talking about driver to driver, the only reason he didn't win championships that time was because of his cars. They were terribly unreliable, and they were not nearly the fastest. Okay, cut Lotus some slack, they were fast, but let's be honest, McLaren were the GOATs. Scenes of wonder we're gonna go through. Let's analyze some more driving. We already talked about Senna's technique, his braking, and the fact that he doesn't need a trail brake. Well, one trick he really perfected in defending is called the chop. When he's side by side with an opponent, even if the opponent is slightly in front of him, they come to a fast bend or a slow corner, anything that has an angle, he wouldn't brake. He would just turn in aggressively, chopping his opponent off, shutting the door right in front of their nose and take the corner flat out. He doesn't need to trail brake, he'll rotate later. Another trick that was very similar that he mastered was the invite chop. When there's an opponent behind him trying to overtake, he'd sit on the outside inviting them to take a lunge down the inside, and his timing was absolutely perfect for them to take the bait, but for him to be fast enough that it's almost guaranteed the opponent who's making the lunge will outbrake himself, understeer into oblivion. And then Senna would chop it because he's entering the corner from the better line. So what he can do is just go flat out and then rotate later. Or like he did to Piquet, switch back. He was also a master of blocking on the line, keeping his pace while defending hard. Legal weaving. In the end, he'd be taking the racing line. But Senna also had some legal dirtiness he performed. He squeezed the life out of his opponents, giving them the most awkward line until they had no choice but to back out. This is Ayrton's suffocation. But unlike Max Verstappen, he did it properly as an aggressive art. They didn't chase them off the track and get a penalty for it. To put it the most simply, he made Silverstone feel like a one-laned Monaco because he could take any awkward line, any tightness. So what he'd do is just squeeze his opponents. Although yes, 1 or 2 times there was contact and it ended badly. But most of the time, all he'd be doing is making the most awkward line for his opponents that his opponents couldn't handle, but he could. He would choke the life out of them. Slow death, cruelest thing. But it wasn't just the fact that he could pull off this technique that made him so fast and made him able to do all these tricks. It was because of who Senna is. Do you see what I'm getting at? He developed a determination and a concentration like a viper. It wasn't his technique that gave him those championships and made him such a fast driver. It was the fact that he asked his crew, engineer, whoever was by him when he was about to race, to make his seatbelts tighter. You tell me, Jesse, this is totally irrelevant and stupid. Why are you talking about this? What's tighter seatbelts gonna do? It made him feel the car better. Senna's goal was not to make his technique the most famous all over social media and the headline and look the fastest. He felt his car and did whatever his car told him to do. Ayrton always used the throttle and brake technique, but he tuned it for the car he drove. The fact is, that technique was holistically good, with its fundamentals providing the needed output. Although Ayrton's technique was very suitable to the rain, if you think that's the reason he was good in the rain, you've totally missed the point. Ayrton became the rain master, not because he had the technique for it. You think Senna was born a rain master? He wasn't. From small racing in rain, he sucked. He felt fell for rain. And when you fall for rain, it's a hard fall. But he had a determination to get better. He had an attitude against weakness. He wanted to get to know the rain that he fell for. And so he sharpened his skills until he grabbed Rain by her hair and made her dance with him. And so he honed an innate feel for Rain, a love language of Rain that only Ayrton knew. He danced with Rain where others could only fall for her, made his weakness into his strength. Mixed conditions were no problem. Oh, but the best was when it was pouring. Pouring in showers, rivers, streams of water. When he totally had the inferior car against Nigel Mansell. Yet he just played with him as if he was his own daft dog. Until too many people were crashing, including Mansell who crashed. And then Senna was like, okay, I'm tired of playing this game, let's end the race. It's not even funny. Listen to what he said about this race.
I don't think that was a race, first of all, because it was just a matter of staying on the circuit, and it was not a point to try to go quick at all, and it was impossible. We had a race, very bad one here a couple of years ago, and then was impossible, and today was even worse. There was even more water on the back straight, and you could see that all cars were flying away, flying off, hitting the wall, and surely if I was in the lead I had a little more visibility and I could take my time to make sure I would stay on the circuit, but it was just one of those things. I managed to stay on the circuit, but it wasn't a race at all.
His first win in Portugal in the Lotus. The rain was pouring down hard on the track, super wet conditions. And in total, there were 16 DNFs. And the only driver that Ayrton Senna did not manage to overlap was Michele Alboreto. But the gap between him and Senna was 62.978 seconds. And from Nigel Mansell down, the drivers were overlapped more than once. Yes, it was easy to weight control his sense of balance and sense of rotation, squeeze in any gap he wants, control the grip of all four tires. He used this technique in the rain and it was splendid. It is a really good technique to use in the rain. But the reason he's the rain master is because he knew rain. But I think one of the greatest moments of Senna's whole life, I mentioned that Ayrton can control his weight and tire chemistry so well, like an octopus trying to get through the eye of a cotton needle. Toge master, Monaco 7-time winner. Now put that and rain together. 1984 Monaco Grand Prix. The car Ayrton was driving was the equivalent of a Kick Sauber today. On the most demanding, twisty mountain pass-like fluid track with pouring rain, Ayrton sped like a firebird, killing everyone so fast they didn't even get to see their lives flash before their eyes. From 13th place to what should have been a win for how fast he was catching Alain Prost, he beat Nigel Mansell. He beat Nelson Piquet in a Tolman. He beat Niki Lauda. One of the greatest drivers in all of racing, who was driving the greatest car in Formula 1, the McLaren. Yeah, Ayrton beat him in a Tolman because they were racing on Gunsai Torge and it was raining, so Ayrton got the advantage. You'd need to cheat to beat Ayrton at Monaco in the rain, which kind of did happen. Balestri was getting uneasy that Senna was catching Prost so rapidly, and as soon as Alain wanted to stop the race, he got his request. The red flag and the checkered flag came out. Prost stopped by the flag just before the finish line. Senna was the first one to cross the finish line, but then so that Prost wins, they counted it on the previous lap. And you tell me, oh, Senna also wanted to stop a rainy race. Okay, firstly, Nigel Mansell, who was his only competition, crashed, then was riding on his own. Senna wanted to stop the race to protect the other people who didn't crash yet, because he knew he was the only one who could stay on the track. But although I say that Senna wasn't the king of the rain because of his technique, the fact that he was constantly 100% in the realm of four-wheel steer, center of rotation balancing, he got used to the minor slip and slide at the limit. I mean, he induced it. He was rotating, controlling the grip of all four tires, meaning he anticipated any sort of slipping before it happened. He had an insane feel. In mixed conditions, oh, that's when he was supreme. None of his driving was luck. It was the fact that he listened to his car, that he was so fast. Can you please get this? As long as his car called for it, he understeer rotated. He used his throttle brake technique. He trail braked hard and deep into the corner. He glided in with no inputs. If you don't like the idea, oh, I must listen to my car, I must listen to my car, always just listen to my car. Well, guess what? Your car has the same intentions of you. Go the fastest possible around the corner. If you use the exact same technique that you use in a McLaren, in a Honda Civic, it would be trash. Talking about road cars, you know what happened when all Formula 1 drivers are driving the same road car on a track? Ayrton won. And he also helped produce the greatest road car of all time, the Honda NSX R. This is how he was truly one step ahead of everyone. He was. But then Jesse, how does he only have 3 championships and not 9? If he's the best, then he should have walked over Alain Prost and Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher absolutely walked past him when he joined F1. Okay, first of all, he did not walk past him. Let's start at the beginning. There's a lot I need to get clear.
Drive alone on this lonely way. Like the rain in clouds, my view and makes me feel so strange. I wanna jump into the fire. I wanna get my motion higher. Come on, I need that for new vibration now. I'm gonna leave you, babe. Like a ghost that's beating on my fire.